and so sick of trying.
I've got sunshine.
Melvin Blue Franklin wasn't just the deep voice powering the Temptations. He was the heartbeat of soul music itself. But behind the fame, his life was filled with shadows, mystery, pain, and rumors of conspiracy. Today, we dive deep into the untold truths that shaped the legend behind the voice.
I had no idea it would turn into 25 years in the business. I know that we hoped that we would get a successful group and make some good hit records. We never knew that it would turn into a whole lifetime.
Melvin Franklin, born David Melvin English on October 12, 1942, in Montgomery, Alabama, had an early life filled with challenges and mysteries. Raised in Detroit by his grandmother, his mother, Rose English, was just a teenager when she gave birth to him. Rumors surrounded the identity of his biological father, adding layers of intrigue to his already complicated family life. Despite this uncertain family history, Franklin found solace in music, which would eventually lead him to a life of fame, success, and later, hardship.
And myself in time of trouble, Mother Mary, she comes to me.
As long as I know I have love.
At the age of 10, Franklin moved to Detroit, a city already buzzing with the sounds of Motown, blues, and gospel. Detroit was the perfect setting for a young talent to thrive, and Franklin quickly immersed himself in the city's rich musical culture. He began singing in church choirs and eventually started performing with local doo-wop groups during his teenage years. It was during this time that Franklin met Otis Williams, a fellow musician, while both attended Northwestern High School. This meeting with Otis Williams would set the foundation for what would become one of the most iconic R&B groups in history, the Temptations. In the late 1950s, Franklin joined a group called The Distance, a precursor to the Temptations.
Is it true you've known this man since you were 14?
Yes, indeed. I'm proud to say that Otis Williams is my 23-year friend.
Otis Williams, ladies and gentlemen.
I was impressed with Melvin when I heard him sing with a group called Voice Masters, and at the time he was 16 years old. And to hear a 16-year-old young boy with a bass sounding like an old man.
When the Distance eventually disbanded, Franklin, Otis Williams, and other members like Paul Williams, Eddie Kendricks, and Elbridge Bryant came together to form what we now know as the Temptations. In the early 1960s, the Temptations signed with Motown Records, which became their ticket to stardom. Under the management of Berry Gordy, the group released a string of hits, including classics like My Girl, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, and Just My Imagination. With Franklin's deep, thunderous bass voice serving as the backbone of many of these songs, the group's sound was instantly recognizable. His vocals added a richness and depth that helped set the Temptations apart from other groups of the time. He had a charisma that drew people in, making him a beloved figure both in the music industry and among fans. His deep voice became an integral part of the Temptations' signature sound, and his booming bass lines created a foundation that anchored the group's harmonies.
I refuse to let you go if I have to beg.
However, as the Temptations' fame grew, so did the pressures that came with it. Franklin, like his bandmates, was thrust into the spotlight, which sometimes attracted negative attention. And here's where we get to dive into crazy aspect of his life. His life that was once full of promise and musical success soon became plagued by harsh reality. By the 1970s, Franklin's life took a difficult turn when he began suffering from severe health issues. First remarkable event was in 1978. Franklin experienced a traumatic event that would impact his life greatly. While trying to protect his vehicle during a carjacking in Los Angeles, Franklin was shot. Though he survived the attack, but the incident left him ever shaken and debilitated. Franklin never fully recovered from the physical and emotional toll of the attack, and his condition continued to deteriorate in the following months. Following this, he was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, a debilitating disease that caused immense physical pain and limited his mobility. but he subjected himself to the constant use of cortisone, which left his immune system open to other infections and health problems. For those who know cortisones, they are steroids and are bad for use. In fact, a fan of Franklin's took her time explain how her family had experienced several conditions, and cortisones or any steroids weren't their best option. However, she gave kudos to Franklin, because in his case, it was an abuse of this. And shots of cortisones have extreme effect. But despite this, Franklin kept it together yet delivered. His illness, however, progressively worsened as the years went on. His arthritis made it hard for him to walk, and eventually he needed to rely on a wheelchair. Despite the pain, Franklin's commitment to the Temptations and his love for music never wavered. He continued to perform, pushing through the discomfort to deliver his signature deep bass vocals. Franklin developed diabetes in the early 1980s and later contracted necrotizing fasciitis. To treat his illnesses, Franklin took oxygen tanks with him while on tour. But as Franklin's health worsened, so did the rumors surrounding him. Some speculated that his sudden and severe health decline wasn't natural at all. Whispers of foul play began to circulate, with people wondering if the excessive use of cortisone might have had a terrible effect on his health, which might have eventually led to his death. Despite all the adversities, Franklin's dedication to the Temptations remained unshakable. He was loyal to his bandmates, even as they dealt with lineup and internal conflict. Throughout the 1970s, key members like David Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks left the group, but Franklin stayed, continuing to perform even as his health deteriorated. He was, in many ways, the emotional anchor of the group, a steady presence even during the most turbulent times.
And I'm glad that we've come back together and in love, and we're all looking in the same direction now. I think that pressure from the public had a lot to do with it. I've yet to go anywhere in the world. People always ask about Eddie Kendricks and David Ruffin and are they going to ever come back to the group. I remember we sat over on Claremont at my mother's house on the side of my mom's bed talking one day, Eddie, David, and myself about, wow, let's get back together. It's an ongoing thing, a whole lot of facets to it. All of them point to please come back together, Temptations.
However, Melvin wasn't the only one who faced life-threatening issues within the group at the time. Some key members like David Ruffin, Eddie Kendricks, and Paul Williams all had their fair share. For David, it was known that he abused, which eventually led to his death in 1991. He died at the age of 50, having collapsed at a crack house he visited on the night before his passing, according to the Washington Post. And Paul Williams, though, being the odd one who didn't take alcohol amongst the group in their earlier years, ended up being an alcoholic, which eventually contributed to his demise. Paul Williams not only dealt with alcoholism, but the singer also suffered from sickle cell anemia, a fact he kept a secret from the group's fans. In 1973, Williams was found dead in Detroit. He slumped in the front seat of a car with a gun in his hand. For Eddie Kendricks, his many years of heavy cigarette smoking had left him unable to reach the high notes he used to hit so effortlessly as a younger man. Nonetheless, he continued to perform live over the next several years, oftentimes with fellow ex-Temptations David Ruffin and Dennis Edwards. By the early 90s, Kendricks's health problems began to escalate, and he had one of his lungs removed in 1991. October 5, 1992, the 52-year-old singer passed away from lung cancer. In 1989, his contributions to music were formally recognized when he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a part of the Temptations. It was a well-deserved honor, highlighting the enormous impact he had on the world of music. Just a few years later, in September 1994, the Temptations received another accolade, a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. These moments were a celebration of Franklin's decades of dedication and the legacy that he and his fellow Temptations had built. His story is one of resilience in the face of adversity. Despite the challenges he faced, Whether it was the speculation surrounding his family history, the crippling health problems, or the personal tragedies that came his way, Melvin Franklin's contribution to music is undeniable. His voice continues to inspire and move listeners, and his role in shaping the sound of Motown is etched into the annals of music history. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, Franklin's health took a turn for the worse. His arthritis had progressed significantly, and his immune system had weakened, leaving him vulnerable to other health problems. His physical condition became so severe that he had to rely on his family and friends for support. His days of touring and performing with the Temptations grew fewer as his body began to break down. By early 1995, Franklin's health had reached a critical point. In addition to the ongoing effects of rheumatoid arthritis, he was also suffering from complications related to diabetes. His weight fluctuated, and he became increasingly reliant on medical interventions to manage his symptoms. On top of everything, his immune system remained weak, making it difficult for his body to fight off infections or recover from the numerous health issues he faced. In late February 1995, Franklin collapsed and fell into a coma. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors worked to stabilize him. Unfortunately, after several days, it became clear that Franklin's body had endured too much, and on February 23, 1995, he passed away from heart failure at the age of 52. His death sent shockwaves through the music community, with fans and fellow musicians mourning the loss of a true legend. Franklin was married to his second wife, Kimberly, at the time of his death. He had 5 children, all of whom supported him during his health crises. Franklin's passing marked the end of an era for the Temptations. He had been the heart and soul of the group for over 3 decades, and his deep bass voice had become a defining feature of their sound. Though his life was marked by rumors, controversies, and physical struggles, Franklin's legacy as a musical genius remains intact.
I've been blind.
In 1998, actor D.B. Woodside portrayed Franklin in the Temptations miniseries, though the portrayal of his death was altered from reality. Franklin's death was still fresh in the minds of his family and friends, and the filmmakers chose not to depict the event exactly as it had occurred. However, in 1999, Franklin's mother, Rose, filed a lawsuit against the creators of the miniseries, objecting to the unauthorized usage of her name and the inaccurate depiction of her son's death. Though the court ultimately ruled in favor of the filmmakers, the case added another chapter to Franklin's complex and controversial legacy.